the pastness of the action. It is just used as a modal auxiliary to form a question which means a request, or which has the tone of a request. So, could you tell me what I should do? Could you give me some water, for instance? You can make a request like that. You want water? You want to ask someone? You can say, could you give me some water? Or could you please give me some water? Or could you give me some water, please? So, could is used to make a request, and syntactically, in terms of its construction, it is a question, and in terms of its usage or function, we may say, that is to say, semantically, that sentence is a request. So, could you tell me what I should do, please? Please added to show politeness, and then you ought to have a quiet chat with her about it. You ought to have a quiet chat with her about it. You ought to. That shows moral obligation. That shows moral obligation. Ought to is a modal auxiliary that is used to give the sense of moral obligation. So, you ought to have a quiet chat with her about it. Or we can say, we ought to respect the elders. Or we can say, we ought to help the poor people. So, ought to is used as a modal auxiliary to show our moral obligation, to show our moral duty. And here in this sentence, ought to is used to give an advice that it is your moral duty. We may imply it that way, that it is your moral duty to have a chat with her. But what? Quiet chat. The word quiet is important, because a chat is quiet means you can talk to her calmly about it and things will be sorted out. That's what the speaker says. We listen to the dialogue first and then we shall talk about that in more detail.
E. My sister keeps borrowing my things and losing them. Could you tell me what I should do, please?
You ought to have a quiet chat with her about it.
Good. Again, I will play it again for you so that you can again listen to it, and if possible, after listening to the audio, the sentences would again be there on the screen, and maybe some of you can try. And remember, as I told you earlier also, in my earlier lectures also, that when you see some practice on the screen and when you listen to the audio, you can try to repeat them in the manner pronounced or in the manner spoken by the speakers in the audio. And by doing that, by mimicking the voice in the audio, maybe you can pick up that sentence very easily, or that can facilitate your ability to speak. Again, I remind you, I told you earlier also, that listening to your own voice and speaking in English, and listening to your own voice speaking in English, is very useful in developing that ability or developing that confidence that is required to speak in English. I again play the audio.
E. My sister keeps borrowing my things and losing them. Could you tell me what I should do, please?
You ought to have a quiet chat with her about it.
Fine. So we move to next slide, where suggestions, suchan, suggestions, that is used. There is a slight difference between an advice and a suggestion. Advice is more forceful, suggestion is less forceful. The person is free to accept the suggestion or reject it. Whereas in the case of advice, we believe that the person should accept it and should follow it. So, again we have some sentences that shows you the sentence patterns that you can always use to make suggestions. One is using the verb suggest directly, direct suggest. I suggest we take the night train. I suggest directly, the verb is suggest, so it is my suggestion. And what is the suggestion here? We take the night train. So I suggest we take the night train. Or it can be a more indirect way of giving a suggestion by using can. You can search the net for this topic. So here the suggestion is go and search the net, but we put it with can. You can search the net for this topic. Here can is not used to show either ability. It is not used to give permission. It is used to give suggestion. So another use of can. One is, of course, we have seen earlier also that it can be used to make requests. It can be used to give permissions. Yeah, you can go now, as we say, as we often say, yes, you can use my phone, and you are giving permission to others. Here in this sentence that you see on your screen, it is the another use of can where the intention is to give suggestions. So you can search the net for this topic. And then another modal auxiliary used in the next sentence. You might need an insurance policy soon. Use of might. Again, might is used as a modal auxiliary, and the intention here is to sound like a suggestion. That it sounds like a suggestion. You might need an insurance policy soon. And then the next. Why don't you join an aerobics class? Why don't you? You pick up that. You pay attention to that. Why don't you? And then why don't you? That is a that you may say the initial part of the sentence, the driving part of the sentence, the important part that you have to learn by heart. You can learn that by heart also. And then we put the verb that we want to use. So here it is, why don't you join an aerobics class? Why don't you see a doctor? Why don't you buy a new car? So why don't you, and then the verb that we want to use. So why don't you read this book? Why don't you search on the internet? Why don't you send him a mail? Why don't you phone him? Why don't you? And then the verb that we want to use. So that pattern again is useful, and you should keep that in mind. We go back to the slide, and here we have, you could be cleaning the office while I am away. You could be cleaning the office while I am away. Again, could be. And then it's it shows progressive aspect of the action, or progressive aspect of the action in the verb clean. So you could be cleaning the office while I am away. That's a gentle way of suggesting someone to do something. So he says, the speaker has used this. You could be cleaning the office while I am away. So it says that when I am away, you please clean the office. But it's a polite way and indirect way to making and suggestion. And then I suggest we travel by train. We looked at it in the earlier slide also, directly using the word suggest to make suggestion. And then the next one, shall we dine out tonight? Now use of shall to make suggestions is very common and very useful, and it sounds good also. It sounds good also. So shall, and then shall we dine out tonight? Now remember, here we have to use only the first person. Shall we dine out tonight? Or shall I bring you something? That is, shall I bring you tea? Then shall we dine out together? Shall we go to a movie? So suggestion. Friends are talking, and suddenly someone comes up with a suggestion. So he can say, shall we go to a movie? Shall we go for a movie? So shall is used to make suggestion. It is not a question. Again, the two aspects of a sentence. Syntactically, in terms of its syntax, in terms of the way a sentence is constructed, it is a question, but it is not a question. It is a suggestion. Shall we dine out tonight? It's not a question that shall we dine out tonight, whether we should dine out or not. It is a suggestion that, and then use of let's enjoy ourselves. let's enjoy ourselves, let's is always used to make suggestions. And then let's not waste time. Again, another another example of using let's. Let's is a short form, contracted form of let us, and then enjoy, whatever verb you can put there. Let's enjoy ourselves, let's see a movie, let's listen to music, let's read newspapers, let's read novels, let's, and then we keep changing the verbs, and then you can make as many sentences as you want. And that would be a very helpful exercise also for you, because when you do this exercise, because you know so many verbs, it's very the common verbs that we all know, and you can use them. Let's read this book, let's see this movie, let's meet this person. So when you speak 5, 10, 15 sentences of the same pattern, on the same pattern, then that pattern, that sentence structure gets internalized, and then you can use that without any hesitation. So don't forget to practice the patterns that you see here. And I advise you or I suggest you write down these sentences that you see on the screen. So let's not waste time. And then why don't we have a party? In the earlier slides also, when we were talking about advice, we saw the use of why don't, and then there it was why don't you. So advice is always for someone else, so why don't you go and see a doctor, why don't you buy a new car, why don't you pay attention to what your parents say. So why don't you, because it is an advice, it is for someone else. Here why don't we, because it is suggestion, so it is for all of us, so including the speaker. So he says, why don't we have a party? And then how about a game of chess? How about is a very useful, and it sounds very colloquial, so it has a flair of its own, and it always gives the impression that yes, the speaker has that knack of using language in a very informal way. So how about, and then you can put, as it is shown here, how about a game of chess, how about a cup of tea. So the meaning is, shall we have a cup of tea? So how about, and another way of using how about is using verb after it. For instance, how about going for a movie? How about having a cup of tea? Having, we use that. How about seeing a movie? You can directly say, how about seeing a movie? So how about, and then you can put any verb, but remember to put that verb in its with its ing form, that is with its present participle form. So two ways in which you can use this how about type of sentences, how about kind of sentences as we call it. How about a game of chess, or how about having a game of chess, or how about playing a game of chess. So you can put verb there, or you can do without it. In the next sentence it's what about, and then having is put into bracket, so it is optional. You can also use it, or you can do without that also. So if you remember, if you are using a verb after that, don't forget to put present participle form of the verb. So how about seeing a movie, how about meeting the principal, how about seeing the doctor. So how about, and then seeing or meeting or watching, or buying, you can use this kind of words. How about, and then buying a car. How about watching a movie. How about meeting the principal. So how about, and then verb in present participle form, or verb with ing as we commonly refer to it. So that is another way of making suggestions, an informal, colloquial way of making suggestions. And we should pick up this, small sentences that can be very useful. You can use that in your day-to-day conversation, and that would add to your confidence, and you would have that better confidence to speak in English. Now we have a dialogue here, and Rohan and Deepa and Karan, they are talking about going on a picnic, going out, and then they are planning it, and let's see how it works.
3 friends plan to go on a weekend trip to Bangalore.
Shall we go by bus on Friday evening?
Oh no, it's so uncomfortable.
I suggest we take the train.
We could go by the Bangalore Express. That'd be quick.
How about meeting at 5 this evening at my place to finalize our plans?
Fine.
So 3 friends are talking, and they are planning to go on a picnic. Rohan says, shall we go by bus? Shall we go? Shall we? As I told you earlier also, a way of suggesting, making suggestion. Shall we go by bus on Friday evening? That is his suggestion, that let us go by bus and on Friday evening. And Deepa says, oh no, it's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. And Karan makes another suggestion. I suggest we take the train. So I suggest, that is another construction, Karan is using that. And Deepa says, we would go by the Bangalore Express. That would be quick. We could go by the Bangalore Express. So we could go, another way of making a suggestion. 3 friends are deciding something, all 3 of them are giving their suggestions, and then they can decide. So we could go by, that she uses. And then in the next slide, as we see, it is how about. I told you use of how about. Here you can see how about, and then the verb is used, meeting. To meet, and then we have present participle form of that verb. So how about meeting at 5 this evening at my place to finalize our plans? How about? What is your idea? That is what he says. What is your view? What is your idea if we meet at 5 this evening at my place to finalize our plans? So how about meeting? And then Karan and Deepa respond to it with a fine. So they agree to the suggestions of Rohan that we can